Leaving aside this issue of deep fake videos, you look at video it's hard to argue with, and footage of a Russian war machine moving over the top of a passenger vehicle and crushing it. But thankfully, apparently, this bloke survived that somehow.
Yeah.
But there was video not long ago from when he was President Donald Trump attacking Germany in a meeting, saying you're buying resources from Russia, you're giving them billions to prepare for future war. Everyone sort of hounded him at the time, but you got to wonder where those comments sit right now.
Well, it's another thing that the mainstream media are finally catching up on, and that is the phrase, Trump was right. And in many instances, we're seeing time and time and time again that he was right. And there are things that aren't being reported. Let's have a look at the Durham report recently, which came out, of course, which was another great example of Trump being right. He said, and there's this famous clip now going around of him saying on 60 Minutes that the Clintons spied on his campaign, and he was almost scoffed at and laughed at. And yet it turns out it was actually absolutely accurate. It's one of the more egregious political scandals in our times, just not getting covered. So there's a lot of that. He went to NATO, if you remember, and there's that famous photo of him leaning back with his arms folded and Angela Merkel leaning forward, looking at him like she's telling off a schoolboy. And he just remains resolute. And he said all of these things. He said, you are not doing enough, NATO countries, to protect your own defence. You're not spending up to your 2% or whatever the figure was, and you need to, because you cannot continue to rely on the United States military. And that's a good lesson for everyone everywhere. I mean, I think what we see in the Ukraine at the moment is a terrible, awful, tragic reminder that we have to stop listening to the small voice in our communities of these radical green activists who tell us that we need to turn off all of our fossil fuels, that need to destroy our economy for the purposes of, because as they've been saying all week, Vladimir doesn't care about a net zero, I can assure you.
Yeah, he says he uses the propaganda and the spin about being on board with the carbon side of the argument and like stopping global warming, but his actions speak otherwise. And your Senate colleague from the Nationals in Queensland, Matt Canavan, tweeted a reference to Hillary Clinton in a document that was released in 2014 where she said, "We were up against Russia pushing oligarchs and others to buy media. We were even up against phony environmental groups." And she said she's a big environmentalist, but these were funded by the Russians to stand against any effort, that pipeline, that fracking, whatever will be a problem for you. And a lot of the money supporting that message was coming from Russia. Does that need to be investigated a little bit further now?
Look, it probably does, and I'm sure we get all of that all across the board on all issues. There's all these reports, of course, initially in the early stages of COVID with Chinese bots doing the same thing from the Chinese Communist Party, showing people falling over and collapsing in order to create this sense of fear. And I think there is, in these authoritarian regimes, a real need to try to create chaos and division in the West. It's really our system that they're up against, because we have this system that stood the test of time, a great system, democracy, and so on and so forth. So you can well imagine that in the case of this last little event, I mean, Russia have Germany right where they want them in many ways with this pipeline, this Nord Stream pipeline, where I think Germany gets something like 40% of their natural gas from Russia. And what better way to try to weaken those countries than by making them switch off fossil fuels? I mean, we have to learn these lessons here. We have to remind ourselves that we cannot just be flippant with our energy security. And once again, that was another thing Donald Trump was right about. He made America energy independent, which was exactly the right thing to do.
That energy security debate and fuel security is something we'll chat with Senator Jim Molan, one of your Liberal colleagues from New South Wales, very shortly. He's been a regular advocate on that front. But on fuel, Senator Rex Patrick, your South Australian colleague, is an independent, was calling for the fuel excise to be halved by the federal government. But I see Rod Sims told the Press Club last Wednesday, Australia has, I think, the fourth lowest level of taxation on fuel in the world, so he didn't think he'd see anything happen on that front.
Yeah, look, Rex says a lot of things that I just tune out, frankly. So without being too disrespectful, it's very easy as an independent to throw these sort of things around. And look, one thing I will say though is the concept of energy security has to be a paramount one. We have to be ready for the sorts of things that we're seeing, in the Ukraine to sort of start to permeate across the globe. And the first thing that you show a weakness in, and in actual fact, the Russian forces themselves, by all reports, are struggling with their own fuel supply issues and supply lines. So
there's a humorous video of a tank that's been pulled over on the side of the road, and the Ukrainians giving him a stir, saying, "Do you want some fuel, mate?"
I've got a jerry can at the back. What does your BMP need? Yeah, exactly. It runs on diesel. Oh, well, bad luck. It's true though. It's sort of, I mean, the whole thing is tragic to watch unfold, because it is, but it is highlighting some of these points once again for us that we shouldn't need reminded, but we keep reminding, because unfortunately there are those in our community that see things a different way and want to make us wholly reliant on, windmills and solar panels. It just doesn't work, and we need to heed these warnings.